Greetings viewers, you're on the Crasmoto channel. Italian motorcycles are a fascinating part of motorcycle engineering history, and among the many brands from the Apennine Peninsula, there is one that we will talk about in this episode. This is Meccanica Vergara Agusta, one of the few motorcycle brands that combines decades of Grand Prix racing success with an exotic lineup of road motorcycles. For many years, Meccanica Vergara Agusta has been designing and producing two-wheeled machines that are famous for their beauty and attention to detail, power, and excitement, and evoke a storm of emotions in their riders. Make yourself comfortable. Enjoy watching. The Agusta surname first appeared at the beginning of the 20th century and belonged to a pioneer of the emerging Italian aviation industry, Count Giovanni Agusta. Giovanni was born in Sicily, but to achieve his goals, he moved to the industrially developed north of Italy. In 1907, in Cascina Costa Varese district, he founded his own company in the aviation industry. And already in 1910, the first aircraft called AG-1 was ready. World War I showed that the airplane as a design, even in the rather primitive form it existed at that time, could be effective on the battlefield. And as a reconnaissance tool, it was simply irreplaceable. Agusta's aviation production surged during World War I, and Count Agusta volunteered for the Malpensa Air Battalion. Military orders increased annually. This prompted Count Giovanni Agusta in 1919 to establish the Costruzioni Aeronautiche, Giovanni Agusta Società Anonima Aircraft Factory in the town of Samarate. In 1927, Giovanni Agusta died at the age of 46, and his business was inherited by his wife Josephine and his sons Domenica, Vincenza, Mario, and Carrada. The main figure in the company became Domenica Agusta. From 1932 to 1945, he devoted himself entirely to the aviation industry, creating various models of military aircraft. However, towards the end of the 30s, Domenica decided to expand the scope of his company's activities. This decision minimized risks and boosted income. He planned to expand the range by adding motorcycles, especially since demand for them was growing in Italy. Work on the project began with the development of the power unit. However, the start of World War II slowed down this process. In 1943, a simple single-cylinder, 98cc two-stroke engine with a wet clutch, 2-speed gearbox, and 4.5 horsepower was ready. Motorcycle production couldn't be organized yet because the war was ongoing. As you know, Italy ended up on the list of the defeated, and according to the Paris Peace Conference, the size of the Italian armed forces was limited. This meant that all kinds of military orders, including for aviation, came to an end. This time, the company from Cascina Costa had to urgently look for an alternative or shut down. Fortunately, there was already experience in engine building, and Italian society needed inexpensive and simple means of transportation. On January 19, 1945, Domenica Agusta founded Meccanica Vergara Agusta to launch the motorcycle project. Already in October of the same year, a ready pre-production prototype was presented to the press in Milan. It was a lightweight motorcycle with a rigid rear suspension and a lever-type front fork. The gas tank had large Meccanica Vergara letters, and the front fender plate read Vespa 98 cubic centimeters. Yes, you heard that right, Vespa. However, they had to give up that name. It was already taken. In 1946, the motorcycle went into production under the name Meccanica Vergara 98 in two versions. The first was called Economia and was almost identical to the 1945 prototype. The second, more advanced version, Turismo, had a 3-speed gearbox and a swing-arm rear suspension. The initial scale of production was quite modest. In 1946, only 50 motorcycles rolled off the assembly line, but that was just the beginning. A small digression. Describe the character of Italians in one word. The word I think of is expressive. They are emotional, loud, and it's no surprise that guys with such a fiery character from the Apennine Peninsula have succeeded in all kinds of racing. As early as 1946, Meccanica Vergara Agusta began officially competing in regular endurance races, and victory didn't take long to come. In the first season, Vincenzo Ninzioni won races in La Spezia in October and Monza. On November 3, all podium spots then went to Meccanica Vergara Agusta riders. It was on this wave of success that the 98 Sport model was built. It differed from previous versions by having a telescopic fork, a wheelbase shortened by 5 centimeters, and an engine boosted to 5 horsepower. It may sound modest at 5 horsepower, even the Alpha moped had more, but at the time, it was a record for production engines of this size. In 1947, Meccanica Vergara Agusta attended the Milan Trade and Industrial Fair to showcase new products. The motorcycle lineup was expanded with a luxury version of the Meccanica Vergara 98 model, a 2-stroke model with a 2-cylinder 125cc engine and a 4-stroke single-cylinder 250. The design of the 250 Turismo was typical for its time. For example, with a 6-to-1 compression ratio, the single-cylinder engine produced 11 horsepower and could reach 110 kilometers per hour. Due to its weak performance, the motorcycle stayed on the assembly line for 3 years, and after 100 units were produced, it was discontinued. The 2-cylinder 125 was well received by the press and public, but wasn't produced due to high cost. Instead, in the spring of 1948, consumers were offered the more affordable 125 Turismo with a single-cylinder 5-horsepower engine. By that time, the 98 cubic centimeters displacement had lost its relevance in terms of sports. Post-war racing anarchy was gradually giving way to official events with the classic Grand Prix format of class division, 125, 250, and 500 cubic centimeters. In 1948, at the nation's Grand Prix in Faenza, no competitor could challenge Franco Bertoni and his Meccanica Vergara Agusta in the 125 cubic centimeter class. However, the competition was tough. In 1949, Agusta lost to Mondial and Moto Marini. To secure a technological advantage, Domenica Agusta recruited designer Piero Rimoro and the chief mechanic of the racing team, Arturo Magni, both from the Gilera company. And this duo built 2 excellent racing models, a 500cc inline-4 and a 125cc single-cylinder with 2 overhead camshafts. In fact, the Meccanica Vergara Agusta 500, specifically its engine, was a copy of the Gilera engine. That's because Rimoro and Magni took the blueprints when they left their previous job. The first major racing win came with the new 4-stroke overhead valve, 125cc bike Britton Cecil. Senford won the 1952 Tourist Trophy and became 125cc world champion on a Meccanica Vergara Agusta. And in September of the same year, Leslie Graham made Count Agusta the happiest man in the world by winning the company's first Grand Prix in the 500cc class on the sacred asphalt of Monza, beating Umberto Mazzetti on a Gilera by as much as 58 seconds. A scandal was brewing. Giuseppe Commendatore Gilera was so enraged that he filed a protest, claiming that the Meccanica Vergara engine had a larger displacement than allowed by the class, but the commission found no violations. There simply weren't any. Success in competitions made the company's name, which allowed them to increase sales. In 1949, the product line expanded to include scooters, and in 1955, mopeds, produced until 1969. A large share consisted of lightweight sports motorcycles, which were eagerly bought by aspiring Italian racers. They were attracted to Meccanica Vergara Agusta's machines by their good power, performance, and affordable price. Between 1948 and 1953, the company launched several 125cc bikes. The 125 Motori Lungo was the most popular sports motorcycle of that era. 1953 was a very important year for Meccanica Vergara Agusta's industrial production, thanks to a wide range of models and the introduction of the original 125 Pullman model production volume, reached 20,000 motorcycles for the first time. In addition, the first factory licensed to produce motorcycles for export was launched in Spain. However, pay attention to the numbers. What are 20,000 motorcycles for Italy? That's not very many. And Meccanica Vergara Agusta won't be the company that puts many Italians on two wheels. When it comes to mass production, Vespa, Lambretta, Ducati, and Moto Guzzi will succeed. But Count Agusta's passion will actually always be a rather modest production of exotic motorcycles with a focus on racing. Remember how the Agusta family's business started? Yes, with aviation. And in 1952, the Agusta Aviation Company resumed operations after a long period of inactivity. That's where they began assembling American Bell helicopters under license. Along with that, agreements were made to supply military equipment to the Italian Navy, the Shah of Iran, and some other militaristic regimes of certain countries. Where military equipment, weapons, and ammunition are made, large sums of money are at stake. Soon, helicopter assembly became the Agusta family's main income, while for Domenico, motorcycles turned into a hobby. Now he no longer had to wonder where to get a stack of money for developing a new racing motorcycle model, or for the factory team's participation in competitions. At that time, the range of serial products from Meccanica Vergara consisted of motorcycles and scooters with two-stroke engines ranging from 98 to 150 cubic centimeters. But people living in mountainous regions always preferred four-stroke engines because of their higher torque. That's why Rimuru was tasked with developing a four-stroke road model. And in 1953, two models of 175 cubic centimeter motorcycles went into production. The lineup grew over time. This series of machines was produced until the 60s and included touring, sports, and super sports models. There were also two racing versions. Because of the shape of the gas tank, the sports models became popularly known as Disco Volante, the flying saucer. The 175cc engine became famous not only in road racing. From 1955 to 1958, Meccanica Vergara produced off-road racing motorcycles and participated in competitions, including the 6 days trial. There was also a tricycle with a load capacity of 300 kilograms with this engine called the Motocaro. Unfortunately, the 175cc family had a significant drawback. Basically, it was the flip side of its advantages. The motorcycle was designed by a racing engineer who followed a rule brilliantly formulated by Ferdinand Porsche. The perfect racing car crosses the finish line first and then falls apart into its component parts. The four-stroke 175cc Meccanica Vergara Agusta bikes had excellent performance, but they weren't durable. They were even nicknamed fragile diamonds. These models were the best sellers of the company from Cascino Costa. In 1956, the company introduced the model 83 Motorcycle 83 refers to the engine displacement. The engineers at Meccanica Vergara Agusta experimented with engine displacements in order to create a lightweight motorcycle capable of carrying two people, while still having sufficient performance and fuel efficiency. That same year, the engineers were ready to present a 250 cubic centimeter model, the 250 Raid. However, the problem was that the motorcycle was heavy and unimpressive, simply copying the 125C design with only a slight increase in size. In 1959, a 300cc model was meant to solve the issue, but only 544 250cc bikes and about 500 300cc bikes were made. This is taking into account that small batches of these motorcycles were supplied to Italian police and military. By 1959, the 175cc engine had been bored out to 232cc and installed in the Tiber model, but the model was not popular. The engine stayed in production until 1968 and was used in a cargo tricycle. At that time, the management of Meccanica Vergara Agusta faced a difficult task to rid the brand of its dubious reputation as fragile diamonds. And here the experience of the aviation division came in handy. Since it was a licensed production of helicopters, technologies were coming in from abroad, in this case from the United States of America. Several new technologies were applied in motorcycle production. Mechanica Vergara. Agusta is experimenting with materials and processing technologies, prototypes of hydraulic drives, two-stroke engines with direct injection, and so on. In general, at that time, the engineers significantly improved the engine lubrication system, which made it possible to increase its service life several times over. The main advertising message of the new four-stroke Mechanica Vergara Agusta 125 TRI focused on its reliability and a guaranteed mileage of 100,000 kilometers without any problems. That's why the model was nicknamed Centomila, which literally means 100,000. In the late 50s, the European motorcycle market continued to grow. However, the first signs of the coming crisis appeared, which forced many motorcycle manufacturers to cut back on racing investments and related research. After the 1957 MotoGP season, Italian motorcycle manufacturers Gilera, Moto Guzzi, and Mondial jointly agreed to withdraw from Grand Prix racing due to rising costs and declining sales. Count Agusta initially supported the movement, but then changed his mind. Mechanica Vergara Agusta continued to dominate Grand Prix racing, winning 17 consecutive world championships in the 500cc class. Domenico Agusta, having the finances, hired the best riders of that time, including Carlo Ubbiali, John Surtees, Mike Halewood, Giacomo Agostini, Phil Reed, and the best engineers, particularly Arturo Magni. The four-cylinder and from the mid-60s three-cylinder Agusta racing bikes tore their competitors to shreds. From 1949 to 1976, Mechanica Vergara Agusta motorcycles won 270 MotoGP races, as well as 38 individual championship titles and 37 Constructors' Cups. The 60s saw a crisis in the European motorcycle industry and sales volumes declined. The company tests itself in different vehicle classes. 50cc, 125, and 150 returned to off-road sports, and by 1966, the 5-speed gearbox becomes standard for 125s and above. The boldest experiment by Mechanica Vergara Agusta happened in 1965. That year, at the Milan Motorcycle Show, the company's flagship model with a 600cc inline-4 engine was presented. The global motorcycle industry had been moving toward this event for decades. Demand for larger engine motorcycles was rising, making the idea of adding an inline-4 engine to a production model very appealing. Mechanica Vergara Agusta became a pioneer in producing a motorcycle with a transverse inline-4 engine in the frame. Such an impressive debut overshadowed another new model, the Mechanica Vergara 250B, a twin-cylinder, which was also a new and interesting model for the company. However, the twin-cylinder was unlucky. It had mediocre performance and a high price for its class. By 1970, just 1,500 units of the 250B were made before it was replaced by the more successful 350B. The company's production volumes remained small, and Domenico Agusta was always distinguished by his own vision of what and how to produce. And while the racing machines were magnificent and proved their superiority in almost every race, the company's civilian machines were not as fortunate. By the second half of the 60s, technically good motorcycles had completely fallen behind in terms of design. Mechanica Vergara Agusta looked like machines from the 50s. That very first production Transverse 4, which was painted black, got the unpleasant nickname Black Pig and was received rather coolly by the public. In 1965, a three-cylinder model was created for racing, one of the brand's most successful racing models. On the three-cylinder Mechanica Vergara Agusta motorcycle known as Tricilindri, Giacomo Agostini won 13 out of his 15 world championship titles between 1966 and 1973. The three-cylinder engine was developed based on the 250cc twin with a planned displacement of 350cc. The engine was perfected in 1966, and a 500cc version was also created. The creation of this engine and the motorcycle as a whole proved once and for all that it was possible to surpass the power of Japanese motorcycle manufacturers. All you need for this is the right team of engineers and enough funding to do the job. In this footage, the now elderly Giacomo Agostini is starting up one of these motorcycles. Listen to its sound. Agusta developed inline six-cylinder racing engine prototypes, first appearing in the 350cc class in 1957 and later revived the project in 1968. But none of the motorcycles ever made it to the racetrack. The only surviving six-cylinder is now in the Meccanica Vergara Agusta factory museum. In general, the 60s were an era of experimentation for Meccanico Vergara. The company tried its hand with various technologies, aiming to satisfy a wide range of people and secure government contracts. Starting from the late 40s, there was a whole line of three-wheeled vehicles. In '56, a full-fledged Meccanica Vergara Agusta car appeared. The 1100 D2 model was a small truck equipped with a 1.1-liter 27-horsepower diesel engine and was capable of carrying a ton of cargo. Among the experimental vehicles, it's worth mentioning a single-seat hovercraft with a 300cc two-stroke twin engine from 1959, a compact tractor from 1962, and an articulated tracked all-terrain vehicle, created by order of the Italian Ministry of Defense in 1969. But none of these gained any particular popularity. And then the 70s arrived. Meccanica Vergara Agusta dealers from the United States noticed the great potential of the inline-four and suggested entering the American market with a flagship 750cc model. So, in 1970, the legendary 750 Sport and 750S America appeared. Excellent dynamic motorcycles. The 750S America was a luxurious model. Its engine produced a maximum of 75 horsepower, and the motorcycle could reach a speed of 210 kilometers per hour. However, the dealers' hopes for lots of orders, crazy popularity, and bags of money were shattered by the high price of $6,500. The competitor, the Honda CB750, cost 3 times less, just $2,200 each. In 1971, Meccanica Vergara Agusta faced a sad event. On February 2 at 63, Domenica Agusta died, and the company soon faced difficult changes. The company, never known for mass production or many vehicles, was under intense pressure from the Japanese. After Domenica's death, his own brother Corrado, the youngest of the 4 brothers, took over the leadership. Corrado Agusta wasn't as passionate about motorcycles and racing, so the decline of motorcycle production was inevitable. Although, out of inertia, the company would continue producing machines for another 6 years and keep participating in races up to and including 1976. In the 70s, a 350cc motorcycle appeared in their product lineup. Initially, the 350B looked old-fashioned, but the company turned to one of the greatest designers, Giorgetto Giugiaro, for help. And by 1973, he had designed the Meccanica Vergara Agusta 350 Ipotesi. This motorcycle, despite only 2,500 units rolling off the assembly line over 3 years, set the trend in the motorcycle world for a good 15 years. A long fuel tank, angular lines, cast wheels, disc brakes on both wheels, and an optional fairing like those on Grand Prix machines. It looked really cool. Plus, it was quite a thrilling machine, 27 horsepower, and a top speed of 160 kilometers per hour. 2 years later, the revolutionary 350 went into production. In 1976, a limited series of motorcycles based on the Ipotesi was released. The 500S had an engine capacity of 472cc and 53 horsepower, and the racing version, the 500SS, had 66 horsepower. Only 5 units of the latter were built. Meanwhile, small batches of civilian fours were also being developed. After the 750cc Sport in America, there followed inline engines with displacements of 790, 837, and 862 cubic centimeters. Even when the company ceased motorcycle production in 1977, it gave permission to Arturo Magni to independently make and sell motorcycles under the Meccanica Vergara Agusta brand. The most advanced Grand Prix model of 1978 produced 119 horsepower and weighed only 202 kilograms. It went from 0 to 100 in 3.9 seconds. By the mid-70s, Meccanica Vergara Agusta's financial situation was dire. They had to cut back on their racing program and reduce the range of civilian models. The company ceased motorcycle production in 1977, selling off remaining stock until 1980. Corrado Agusta likely preferred the brand to quietly disappear, but things turned out a little differently. The Castiglione family in Italy started a company making metal fittings in 1960, founded by Giovanni Castiglione, and his business was located near the Agusta and Ermaci factories. Meccanica Vergara Agusta was the dream of the Castiglione brothers, and at the end of 1976, when this company announced its withdrawal from motorcycle racing, they tried to buy out its racing team. But Corrado Agusta didn't want to give the brand to wealthy upstarts and preferred to let it rest in peace. Then the Castiglione family bought a Suzuki RG500 motorcycle, painted it in the traditional Meccanica Vergara Agusta colors, red and silver, and entered it in the races of the 1978 season. That same year, they bought the old Ermaci factory in Varese from Harley Davidson and renamed it Cagiva. Motorcycle production began, and the most ambitious project was the Cagiva 500 Grand Prix, designed by Ezio Mascheroni. The Castiglione family soon turned their company into the largest Italian motorcycle manufacturer, producing 40,000 units annually. In the 1980s, the Castiglione brothers acquired brands, and their racing Cagiva earned them their first wins. The company's machines performed well in motocross, and special versions did well in the newly established Paris-Dakar Rally. By that time, the Castiglione family had acquired Ducati, Motomorini, and Husqvarna. Meccanica Vergara Agusta made headlines again in July 1986 when an ad announced the sale of racing motorcycles, prototypes, chassis, and an engine from its legendary racing division. The news caused such a stir that top journalists called for government action to protect this part of the country's cultural heritage. But unfortunately, the great historical and technical value of these unbeatable racing motorcycles was not enough to attract the interest of the Ministry of Industry and State Holdings. Therefore, all the assets remaining from Meccanica Vergara Agusta went to the Italian-American Roberto Iannuzzi. As soon as the dispute around Iannuzzi was resolved, Meccanica Vergara Agusta returned to the headlines. In spring 1992, the Cagiva Motor Press office unexpectedly announced that the Castiglione Group had officially acquired the Meccanica Vergara Agusta brand rights. The negotiations were exclusively about the ownership rights to the trademark, since almost all the production facilities and motorcycles had been sold off, except for a number of road and racing machines lovingly preserved by members of the Association of Former Agusta Employees. The news caused a huge stir among motorcycle fans. The purchase of the legendary trademark by the most dynamic and determined entrepreneur in Italy's motorcycle industry made the revival of Meccanica Vergara Agusta highly likely. After all, the Castiglione family were the only entrepreneurs at that time capable of reviving motorcycle companies during tough times and turning them into a thriving business. The engineers at Cagiva Motor, faced with a blank slate, did their best, using the legendary Agusta models with 3- and 4-cylinder engines as their starting point. Such a design didn't exist in European motorcycle manufacturing, so Claudio Castiglione had to choose between buying a Japanese engine or developing his own. He chose the second option and settled on a project developed by Ferrari called the F4, which was further refined by the technicians and engineers at Meccanica Vergara Agusta. Exclusive solutions were used in the creation of the engine, such as the radial arrangement of the valves and a removable gearbox. The first was inherited from Ferrari's multi-cylinder engines, and the second from the Cagiva Grand Prix motorcycle. At the same time as the industrial production of the new engine, the chassis and design were being developed. This task was entrusted to the renowned master of his craft, Massimo Tamburini, the director of the Cagiva Research Center. The first prototype was completed on the eve of the 1997 Milan show and was presented to journalists on September 16th. The reporters were amazed by the Meccanica Vergara Agusta F4. The motorcycle was a work of art, painted in the signature red and silver colors. The Meccanica Vergara Agusta F4 was an instant success, becoming the object of dreams for motorcycle fans. Subsequently, the production process was divided into two distinct stages. In the first stage, the plan was to produce 300 limited edition F4 Gold motorcycles with carbon fiber bodywork, magnesium alloy parts, and an engine with a sandcast crankcase. The next stage is the production of the F4S model, intended for a wider range of users, thanks to its price, which will be half the price of the previous version. In April 1999, the F4 Gold was first showcased in action at the Monza racetrack, receiving coverage in over 100 publications. The motorcycle impressed with its speed exceeding 280 kilometers per hour, its unique chassis, and excellent handling. Despite the price of 68 million lire, over 35,000 euros, the F4 Gold was instantly bought up by the wealthiest and most devoted motorcycle enthusiasts around the world. While the revived brand was promoted, behind-the-scenes processes were also underway. In the early 2000s, as Meccanica Vergara, Agusta became Cagiva Group's main brand. But unfortunately, a lack of cash forced Claudio Castiglione to sell a controlling stake to the Malaysian manufacturer Proton for 70 million euros in December 2004. And just a year later, they transferred the company to the Italian financial holding company GEVI for only €1. GEVI had their own agenda. The powerful holding company only cared about immediate profits, regardless of what they produced. They didn't support Castiglione's idea to produce a new line of Norton equipment, and in 2007 they sold Husqvarna to BMW. Claudio was quite upset by all these decisions, especially since Agusta's production was barely hanging on, and the sad ending seemed to be just around the corner. But once again, Castiglione pulled a rabbit out of the hat. In July 2008, the Harley-Davidson Group announced that it was buying for $109 million, the same company it had sold exactly 30 years earlier. Claudio Castiglione remained its president, and the American investment of about 40 million euros made it possible to pay off debts, modernize the existing models, and design an entirely new 675cc three-cylinder engine designed by Ezio Mascheroni. Yes, that's right, the same engineer who developed the Cagiva 500 Grand Prix racer. But the cooperation with Harley didn't last long. A recession impacted the global economy. In October 2009, Harley-Davidson, facing a sharp drop in United States sales, announced it would sell Meccanica Vergara Agusta. And this is where Claudio got lucky. How lucky he was. On August 6, 2010, Meccanica Vergara Agusta, now financially healthy and rejuvenated, returned to Italian hands. The Castiglione family bought it back for just €1. In 2009, the updated liter Corsa Corda engine debuted with 201 horsepower. The four-cylinder F4 and Brutale 990 and 1090 were also updated and modernized. The new three-cylinder engine gave rise to the creation of the mid-displacement sport bike, Meccanica Vergara Agusta F3, which debuted in 2012 and became one of the best-selling bikes in the 600cc class. In 2012, the naked model Brutale 675 got a three-cylinder engine. In 2013, the lineup added the 800cc 800 and Brutale triples. At the end of 2013, Meccanica Vergara Agusta introduced the Rivale 800, an exclusive model, a kind of symbiosis between naked and supermoto, which received the title of the most beautiful motorcycle in its debut year. Also in 2013, Meccanica Vergara Agusta introduced the Turismo Veloce 800, the first touring bike from Meccanica Vergara Agusta. On August 17, 2011, after a long illness, the owner and president of Meccanica Vergara Agusta, Claudio Castiglioni, passed away at the age of 64. A few months before that, he managed to present the prototype of the three-cylinder F3 family at the Milan exhibition. After him, Giovanni Castiglioni, Claudio's son, took over as the head of the company. In 2014, the Brutale 800 dragster version appeared, which later gave rise to a separate family of dragster models. Sales statistics showed things were improving. In 2011, Meccanica Vergara Agusta shipped 3,687 motorcycles to dealers. In 2012, 6,557. In 2013, 7,488. And in 2014, 9,200. But paradoxically as it may sound, the avalanche-like growth in production led to an increase in debt and production costs. The company also had problems with its dealer network and shipping spare parts. They had to cut investments in development, and production volume dropped to 6,000 or 7,000 units per year. And the municipal authorities applied a protective act to the company, which excluded the possibility of bankruptcy. In 2017, an investor who saved the situation was found. In November 2016, Giovanni Castiglioni and the Anglo-Russian fund Komsar Invest, part of the Black Ocean group of companies managed by the Sardarov family, agreed to sign an investment agreement. The restructuring plan for Meccanica Vergara Agusta's debt that they proposed was approved by the court in March 2017, and at the same time, the court extended the protective order. In mid-2017, the new partners finalized their business relationship, according to which 51% of Meccanica Vergara Agusta's shares remained with Giovanni Castiglioni, while 49% went to the Black Ocean Group. In October 2019, the company announced an updated 5-year business plan, which provides for increasing production to 25,000 units per year. Meccanica Vergara Agusta executives say higher production should come from mid-sized machines developed with Chinese brands. Nowadays, Meccanica Vergara Agusta as a company is generally thriving. Special attention is given to innovation and design. A striking example of this activity is the new Super Veloce model in retro sport style, which was introduced in 2020. The model is produced in a limited series in several versions for discerning connoisseurs of the brand. Until 2022, the Super Veloce was equipped with an 800cc engine. And in the first half of 2024, the Super Veloce 1000 Serie Oro was presented. Today, as 60 years ago, Meccanica Vergara Agusta remains a small premium motorcycle manufacturer. Back then, in the 50s and 60s, the focus was on excellent sports motorcycles that brought the company worldwide fame. Now, the fame works for the company, and its lineup consists of bold and daring machines that have absorbed the brand's best traditions. The future of this brand depends on the actions and foresight of its management, as well as on global trends in the world of motorcycle manufacturing. Friends, at this point my story comes to an end. This is the history of Meccanica Vergara Agusta motorcycles. As usual, I remind you that supporting my work isn't that difficult. Leave a comment, share the story with your friends and acquaintances, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I especially want to thank everyone who supports my channel financially through YouTube sponsorships, as well as one-time donations using the details provided in the video. This was Crass Moto Channel. See you next time.